Hello VC, Michael, Clash City Rocker, with a video on a Beatles record collection I've accumulated that was inspired by watching VC YouTube videos. And also built off of a video I made a couple weeks ago called The Non-Completist Record Collection, in which I asked the VC, or actually I was asking myself, am I an accumulator? Am I a collector? And am I a completist? And so I decided to take the collection in a completely different way and think about, if I could only have one record from a band, what would it be? But before I continue, I want to thank all those who have viewed, who have commented, who have liked, who have subscribed, particularly the Non-Completist record collection. A number of you have created your own version of that. I'm incredibly excited about that. I never intended my video to be a tag, but I'm glad that so many people have found it interesting and wanted to create their own version. I've watched most of them. If I haven't watched yours, please send me a link so I can watch it and so I can find out what you think is the most important record in your collection of a particular artist. But what I'm going to talk about today is a completely different kind of thing. And I'm going to show a number of records. Actually, I'm going to show two piles of records. But I want to express how much joy I got, how much happiness, how enjoyable this entire process was. It wasn't so much about the accumulation and the mass. It was just fun. And I learned a ton, which is the whole point about being a collector and being interested in a band, is what do you learn about their music? What do you learn about the process? So I've always been a Beatle fan since I bought my initial couple records. This was the first Beatle record I ever got. This is not it. It resides in my sister's record collection, but this was the first Beatle record I ever had, played it to death. And when I was first buying records in the 70s, I would go back and forth between cassette and vinyl, depending on what was available. So like, here's another one of my originals. This from the 70s. Most of you are probably familiar with it. Purple Capitol label. Later, when I decided I wanted to get better copies of Beatle records, I would go to a record store and I picked up this Rubber Soul. Recognize this, but this actually is not a 65. It's a 66. And yes, it's on the Rainbow label, but it doesn't have the original inner sleeve. Again, at that point in my collecting, I didn't really care. I hadn't watched a bunch of VC YouTube videos yet, so I didn't know what the options were. And this was my white album. And again, I picked this up. As you can see, it doesn't have a number. And of course, it has the purple Capitol labels again. But I picked it up just because I wanted the poster, which I can't find at the moment. Oh, there it is. I wanted the poster and I wanted the pictures. So I picked that up. But that was basically how I was picking up my Beatle records. And then one day I was in my local record store and I decided I wanted to get new copies of those Beatle records, and I wanted to get better versions of the ones that I had. So again, my favorite Beatle record has always been this one. If you remember, this is from '66. I was like, you know what? I want to get a new one. I want to get one that's in pristine condition. So I went and picked this up. Now, most of you are familiar. This is a 2014 remaster, and it is not from the box set. I bought the records individually, and when I bought this one, I also bought this one. So I got my two favorite Beatle records, 2014 mono reissues, and I was completely happy about it. And then I managed to, as I put these records out of order here, I managed to find another one. Again, in my local record store. This one, somebody had taken the shrink off, but it was still fine. And then I ordered Hard Day's Night. Again, you could still buy these new without going through Discogs. And I bought this one, new, with the hype sticker. So I ended up with the 5 Beatle albums from the era of the Beatles I like the best, 64 to 66, 2014 mono remasters. But again, I started watching all these YouTube VC videos about the Beatles mono box, and you know, peer pressure works. So do make a copy of the non-completist record collection video, peer pressure. And I said, okay, I'll do it. I'll try to put together the mono box, and I'll buy the records independently. And I picked up Please Please Me, and I picked up With the Beatles. You all know this. Sgt. Pepper, Magical Mystery Tour. They did the Capitol version, and then the White Album, and of course the mono masters. And I cannot tell you how difficult it was to acquire and find these records. And since I don't like to spend an exorbitant amount of money, it was really hard to find them that didn't cost a proverbial arm and a leg. I did it. I'm happy. I was excited. But the collector in me, or the completist, you decide, started to think, maybe I could get those originals. So if I can't get, say, this, maybe I could get an original UK version of it. And so I started to look around, and I'm like, I'm never going to find those in the States. And if I do, they're going to be ridiculously expensive. But one day, I was in my local record store, and they had these. Hard Day's Night, With the Beatles, stereo, 76 versions of them with the 2 EMI box. And then 2 weeks later, they had this one. And I started to think to myself, I now have 3 of these UK ones. They're not as expensive, so I'm just going to go for it. And I picked up Beatles for Sale, Hard Day's Night. Now, if you notice, the ones with the shrink and the import sticker all come from the same seller. Rubber Soul, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper, and then one day, just for fun, the Beatles oldies. But as I was playing these, I started to notice that there was something funky going on with these stereo mixes. And I made a video about it, and I got a bunch of reactions to it. Mostly people telling me that I had crappy sound equipment and other various personal things. But anyways, what I talked about was how Eleanor Rigby, this stereo version, there's something funky going on, how there was a dropout in the vocals. And it just didn't sound right. So I decided I needed to try to play this record on a different turntable. So I went to my local record store and I put this record on their turntable, and it had the same drop off, not as noticeable, but it was still there. And they said, well, we've got a copy of Revolver. Why don't we play that? And they brought this one out. And what it was a 66 mono. I could not believe it. So now I have my first 66 mono. I never thought I would be able to have them. I did. Super excited. And then a few months later, I was in there and they had 2 more. Hard Day's Night, Beatles for Sale, original UK monos, absolutely pristine, absolutely beautiful, absolutely stunning copies. And then I started to think, okay, I now have 3. And just like with a stereo, if I got 3 of something, that means I've got to have them all. And so over time, I have now acquired with the Please Please Me. By the way, this one is absolutely stunning. Perfect Ematex label. This if you can see the glow off of this, the shine is unbelievable. I don't think it's ever been played. The cover, the sheen on this is unbelievable. Now, did all the copies I pick up look like that? No, like this one, cover's a little rough. Record's beautiful. I'm not going to play the cover. And I picked up Hard Day's Night. And I picked up Revolver. Huh. I don't know what I just did. And I picked up Sgt. Pepper. And I picked up the White Album. Now, a couple of things on these. This Sgt. Pepper, for example, and I learned so much, and again, all from VC YouTube videos. This one is XEX, as the glare gets to me, XEX 6, nice video, huh? XEX 637-1, but what I was looking for is the mother and the stamper, because those of you know it, the mother is here, the stamper is here. The mother on this one is 1, and the stamper on this is 66, and the opposite side is mother 1, and stamper is a lower number as well. Unbelievable. Knew nothing about that stuff until I started watching the videos, and then the final one I got was this White Album. The number here is 119246. Absolutely stunning copy of it. But what's really interesting is that the poster, and particularly the cards, are not on the flimsy paper that the American ones were. They're on cardstock. Now, what I had when I ended up finally playing these was kind of like an out-of-body experience. I felt like I was time traveling. And I was sitting in some English bedroom somewhere. Some kid or young person was putting this record on for the very first time, and they heard Day in the Life. And it totally blew my brain. An almost life-altering experience. Or I put myself back here, 1963. Some kid, some young person playing this Beatle record for the very first time. Owning records like this is different than owning just any old record. And I don't need to just randomly grab one, but owning something from the time and from the period is powerful. And as a collector and as a music lover, that speaks to me more so than almost any of the later or the newer records that I can acquire. So the video is going to get a little bit longer than my usual one, because once I started thinking about the UK copies, I also started to think about the American copies, because, as you all know, American records were different than the British ones, and they're easier to acquire in the States than those UK ones. And I read books like this, The Beatles on Vinyl, and the Bruce Spicer books, and they talk about all of these Beatle records that exist only in the States, like the early Beatles. Couple others I want to show you, like this one, Beatles Something New. And just like with the UK ones, they have mono and stereo as well. And last year, there was another Beatle box set. It had the 5 1964 Beatle records. It's crazy that Capitol created 5 Beatle records in one year. I didn't buy the box. I picked these up singly. And what they tried to do with their reissues, and they did a great job, is they matched the cover. Looking, oh, it doesn't have the George Martin credit on the bottom, so it's a really early version of it. And then they put the original inner sleeve. So I got thinking. I'm like, I have a bunch of those Beatle Capitol records. I wonder if I could put together a complete set. And so I did. Now, before I go through those Capitols, a few oddballs. You all know this. Beatles, introducing the Beatles, England's #1 vocal group. This was the Capitol going back and forth. So VJ first released it. And this is an original The Beatles Above the Spindle Hole. This is a weird variation. This is the VJ label. Not in brackets. It's not the color band one. Yes, it's an original. There's George's Shadow. There's the shine. There's the professional credits on the back. This is what a bootleg looks like. Washed out, etc. But anyways, again, Michael Clash City Rocker, inspired by all of those BC videos, I decided to put together a US Beatle collection. So, BC, as I go through these records, and I'm going to go through them a little bit rather quickly, what am I missing? Is there anything else that's out there that's essential to have as part of the collection? Now, will I do things like this for every band that I like? Of course not. I did it for the Beatles. It's probably the only band I'm going to do it for, but it was fun. So here goes. Meet the Beatles. Mono and stereo. Second album, mono and stereo. Hard Day's Night, United, mono. Something New, mono. Something New, stereo. This one's funny because it's in the shrink, and somebody paid $3.99 for it at By Hoff Brothers Music. Maybe that was you. I have your record. Give me a call. Another one in the shrink. Beatles 65 on, oh, it got distracted by the liner. So I think this is the wrong capital inner sleeve. Now that I'm looking at this, I think this one should be a different color. I think it should be like the one that I have on the stereo one, which is the teen set. But anyways, I started also insisting not only were these original presses, but I wanted to make sure they had the original liner notes. And then I picked up the Beatles Story. This was in the box. And then I picked up Early Beatles Mono, Early Beatles Stereo, Beatles 6. By the way, this is a really good record. Beatles 6 Mono, Beatles 6 Stereo. Love this cover. Great cover. Love the back. So mod. Beatles Help Mono. And then again, my favorite, Rubber Soul. Again, mono, capital label, original inner, capital stereo, rainbow. All of these are originals. All of these have the original inners. And then yesterday and today, can you see Ringo's little sweater cut out in this one? No, this mono one you can't, but on this stereo one you can. Maybe this will be a video for another day. Stereo, Revolver Mono, and stereo. And some of you may not realize it, but they went far enough in the States with the mono. So here's a Sgt. Pepper mono. Everything's in here. The original psychedelic sleeve, the cutouts. Same for this one. Now there's a yellow band at the top. It's a stereo. Magical Mystery Tour. I think this mono one, but I think my stereo one's got that psychedelic sleeve as well. And then this is my white album, which I find really interesting because my number, if you remember, my UK mono is 119 or something. This one is 3,112,000, and yet this is from 1968. It's Los Angeles. What also is interesting is these pictures. Remember I showed you the cardstock ones from the UK? These are on these flimsy paper. It's from 1968. It's funny, the one that's behind me here, which is in as good a shape, the number is 386. Crazy. And then the Beatles, Yellow Submarine. These later ones you all know. Abbey Road. Let It Be. Red Label. And then finally, the Beatles, Hey Jude. So, Michael, Clash City Rocker. I'm a music lover. Beatles are one of my favorite bands. I'm a collector. I like the historical aspect of having that actual physical item in my hands to connect with the history of it, the people who have listened to it, all of it. And that's why I collect what I collect. and that's why I amassed this UK Beatles US and UK collection. But again, I would have never gone down this rabbit hole if it wasn't for the VC. So let me know what you think. If I lost my mind, should I do the same now for Joan Jett? Maybe not. I think I've done enough. All right. Peace.